time a baby is born, the hope of the human race is born again. The job of all parents, regardless of the circumstances of their lives, is to help their children realize their full potential as human beings. Fulfilling this terrific responsibility becomes easier when parents know something about the early stages of development that children go through. Throughout infancy and early childhood, all children learn new skills in a similar sequence. By knowing what that sequence is, you can encourage your children to develop according to it. If they achieve all the normal developmental milestones when they're supposed to, they're more likely to develop their abilities as fully as possible, and they'll be off to a good start in the important early years of childhood. You'll benefit too, because if you understand what your children do and why they do it, parenting becomes even more enjoyable. Before we take a look at the sequences of development, a word of caution. Don't worry if your child's progress doesn't conform exactly to what's being described. There will undoubtedly be some individual differences because every child is an individual with his own timetable. Let's go back now to the first few weeks right after birth. Newborn infants are almost completely helpless. They are also very fragile, so they should be handled slowly and delicately. They usually spend their first 6 weeks sleeping, eating, or crying. When they cry, you don't always know what's bothering them, and it can be very frustrating trying to figure it out. But since they almost always cry for a reason, try to get to the bottom of things by diapering, feeding, or just holding and cuddling. The baby's reactions will tell you whether you've solved her problem. Most child development experts agree that it's impossible to spoil a baby in the first 6 months. In fact, infants who receive prompt attention in the beginning are less demanding later on because they feel secure and loved. So always respond quickly and lovingly when your baby cries. Babies first begin to explore their environment by using their eyes. As early as the first week, many seem to enjoy watching the human face, especially if it's mom's or dad's. Then, sometime in the 2nd month, your baby will give you one of the greatest rewards of being a parent when she looks at you and smiles for the first time. As she begins to stay awake for longer periods, she'll become much more alert and aware of things going on around her. See how she's reaching out and beginning to use her hands for touching? It's important to have objects close enough for babies this age to swipe at. With these first awkward movements, they're learning to use their hands. Look at how well this little guy holds up his head. Between the 2nd and 3rd month, the baby develops more control over all his muscles. Before long, he can lift the heaviest part of his body, the head, while lying on his stomach. So be sure to place your baby on his stomach several times a day, because if he isn't given the chance to practice, he won't develop the muscles needed for head control. Even though babies can't understand words until they're 6 to 8 months old, you should still talk a great deal to them from birth, because a lot of communication takes place without words. Babies become sensitive and responsive to the sound of the human voice at a very early age. For example, they understand the way you say, "Good night," not by the words, but by the tone of voice. You could say any two similar words like, "Good riddance, sweetheart," and he'd think it meant good night. This is how you begin to establish communication, by pairing simple language with common gestures throughout all your routine activities. For instance, every time you pick him up, extend your arms and say, "Up." He'll gradually begin to connect your speech with these gestures, and as he gets older, he'll learn the words. The baby of 4 months feels more like a member of the family than the fragile newborn who arrived such a short time ago. He sleeps through the night, starts to eat solid foods, and becomes very sociable and communicative. He smiles and giggles with delight when you play with him, and he's generally lots of fun to be around. Because he can hear so well now, say his name often when you talk to him. It won't be long before he's responding to the name, and not just to the sound of your talking to him. He'll do a great deal of babbling at this stage, and the syllables you hear him experimenting with now will eventually develop into real words. If it hasn't already happened, in the 4th month your baby will learn to roll from back to stomach. He'll spend much of the time he's awake furiously kicking and moving his legs, strengthening muscles to prepare for crawling and sitting. His hard work will eventually pay off when he's finally able to get to where he wants to go. At 6 months, the baby's vision is developed enough to focus on objects at any distance and follow them with her eyes in any direction. She can also coordinate her hand movements well enough to accurately reach for what she sees. At this age, babies want things they can reach out for and manipulate with their hands. Be sure to surround them with interesting objects so they can do just that. By the time they're 7 to 8 months old, most babies can sit without any support. In fact, they prefer to be in the sitting position. This is a major milestone in a child's life. Another major milestone occurs when your baby becomes aware of the fact that even though something is removed from his line of vision, it still exists. This simple discovery is considered a major step forward in a child's intellectual development. Another of the many things babies learn without anyone teaching them is how to get around. Their natural curiosity makes them want to get from place to place, and sometime between the 6th and 9th month, they may begin creeping or crawling. After crawling, your baby will learn how to pull herself to a standing position, to walk while holding on, and then to stand all by herself. Watching your child learn to walk is truly one of the most joyful events of parenting. Now that she can get around on her own, you have to make sure your home is safety-proofed. You want your baby to be free to explore her environment, but you don't want her to get hurt. As she moves around exploring, everything she gets hold of will go into her mouth. That means pencils and scissors, as well as teething rings and crackers. Make sure you lock up dangerous substances and utensils so she doesn't end up in a situation like this. You'll probably find now that for the first time you'll have to establish some rules about what's allowed and what isn't. If you can, try to be flexible and allow your child to mess up your home, within limits, of course. This freedom to explore will expand her curiosity, and that's important for learning. Keep in mind she's not deliberately trying to upset you. She's just curious about everything. When it comes to language, your child will probably learn to talk even without much help from you. But as her first teacher, there are ways you can encourage language development. Just as you did when she was younger, tell her the names of common items she sees every day in short and simple sentences. Everyone in the family can get into the act. Another thing you can do to encourage language development is to read simple, well-illustrated stories. The reward for all your efforts comes sometime around the 8th or 9th month when your child truly begins to understand familiar words like bye-bye or night-night. Not long after they grasped the meaning of single words, children began to understand short sentences and simple instructions like, "Give that to me." Usually they can understand 5 or 6 words by the time they're 10 months old, but saying that many words may take much longer. As your child's first birthday approaches, you'll know that you're doing everything possible to encourage normal development if you consistently practice these 3 things. Provide love, stimulate curiosity, and encourage skill development. Most important of all is love. Surround her with love, and you'll help her develop a good self-concept. The way a child feels about herself is a reflection of how her caregivers feel about her. If she's loved and well cared for, she'll feel content and secure. But love and affection alone are not enough to ensure the baby's optimum progress. By putting interesting objects within his reach and giving him the freedom to explore his environment, you'll stimulate his natural curiosity and encourage the development of skills that are normal for his age. If your child receives this kind of attention in his first year, you'll be giving him the opportunity to become all he can be. Between the ages of 1 and 2, you'll find that many dramatic changes take place in all areas of growth and development. Among these, one of the most significant is learning to walk. Once they learn how, which happens usually between the 12th and 18th month, children don't want to do anything else. This period also sees a rapid growth in intellectual ability, which is directly related to the development of motor skills. Now that they can move around, they can find out about things they've been looking at but were unable to reach. Everything is new and fascinating to them. Sometimes the things they do may seem like calculated attempts to drive you crazy, but they're really not. These actions are related to normal development and are not acts of rebellion. They're just trying to learn about the world around them. Parents can stimulate their children's curiosity and mental development by guiding them to new experiences and by keeping their environment full of interesting objects and activities. Try to interfere as little as possible with their explorations. Constantly discouraging their curiosity will either break their spirit, which is much worse than breaking a guitar, or strengthen their determination, which just might make them decide to see how far you can be pushed. They can be very insistent about being independent, and especially in the latter half of this year, they'll often test their will against yours by repeatedly doing what they've been told not to. This stage of negativism can be unpleasant, but it is normal. It seems that in order to grow out of the phase of life where they're completely and utterly dependent, children need to go through a period of asserting themselves to strengthen their individuality. The best way to deal with their negativism is to be loving but firm. If you don't set guidelines of what's acceptable and what's not, they'll see the world as chaotic and confusing, and it won't be easy to live with them. So let your children know you're in charge, but be wise enough to give in from time to time in minor struggles. Show them you can be flexible, and they too will learn to bend. Between 1 and 2, the child's understanding of language is increasing all the time. They can follow simple commands and understand simple sentences, and they'll begin to say single words they've heard over and over, words like baby, cup, or juice. Single words gradually expand into short phrases, and shortly before the 2nd birthday, they might even be speaking in simple sentences. Make a conscious effort to talk to your toddlers about things that interest them. They'll imitate your speech, and soon they'll be talking and telling you what's on their minds. The period between 1 and 2 is a period of primary importance in the development of a human being. Personalities emerge during this period, and children really begin to feel like individuals, not just babies. By the 2nd birthday, they know how to walk, to talk, and to think using ideas and abstract images. This may well be the most exciting phase of early childhood. It's truly amazing to watch a child make such major strides in development. child takes on a very different quality after the second birthday. You'll find they suddenly seem more mature. This is largely because they're now capable of controlling their emotions and acting out of reason, not just sheer impulse. As they pass from 2 to 3, they also become more capable in every way, which makes your job as a parent easier. They learn how to feed themselves, wash and dry their own hands and face, although this little guy hasn't quite mastered the neck area yet. Dress themselves in easy items like socks, jacket, sweater, and shirt, and they become very competent at undressing. Children over 2 have relatively good control of their bodies. They can walk, run, and climb easily. They're ready to learn how to ride a small tricycle, and they really enjoy the freedom that this new accomplishment gives them. One of the things that makes 2-year-olds so much fun is that you can actually begin to have conversations with them. It's possible to understand most of what they say as they begin telling you their thoughts in simple sentences, usually about 3 to 4 words long. At this stage in their language development, you can help them increase their vocabulary by keeping in mind these 3 things. First, don't talk down to them or speak at a level that's way beyond their capacity to understand. Second, try to encourage them to make observations. And third, encourage them to express themselves. Suppose your little boy shows you a picture of a motorcycle in a book. You can help the development of observation skills by pointing out some details. Say, "Look, it's shiny and silver and has 2 wheels." Then ask some questions that encourage a response, like, "How many wheels does our car have?" Remember always to speak to your child in a way that's simple enough to be understood, but slightly more complicated than the level she's already able to comprehend. This is the most effective way to promote language development. Toys can also be helpful in stimulating language. Those that engage children in imaginative play do a lot to encourage practice in talking. Providing a wide range of experiences will give them lots to talk about, too. In the area of social development, children can be very aggressive and selfish at this time in their lives. While this can be embarrassing to parents, it helps to remember that social skills are not inborn. They have to be learned. So don't be discouraged. Eventually, children learn to act civilized and cooperate with one another. In the continuing process of learning to become independent, 2-year-olds will often test you to see whose will is stronger. This couple found an innovative way to cope with their child's attempts to interrupt their dinner every night by screaming. Eventually, he gave up trying to monopolize their attention. If you start letting children know at an early age that they can't always have their way, gradually they learn that you mean business. Some specific academic skills which children in this age range should be learning are pointing to big and little, putting together puzzles of increasing difficulty, counting to 3 in imitation of your example, and pointing to colors. Some parents have come to believe that with intellect, memory, and problem-solving skills developing rapidly, this is the time to push their children into developing special abilities. There is no evidence which proves that showing great works of art to 2-year-olds has any lasting beneficial effects. But there is increasing evidence that forcing early instruction on young children can do lasting harm. Remember, there's more to a child than intellect. Too much emphasis on intellectual training can interfere with normal social development. So rather than spending hours developing a program to enrich your child's intelligence, spend that time enriching your relationship instead. You'll both benefit from the time you spend together in the early years of your child's life. Children of 3 are very developed individuals, well on their way to personhood. As much of the negativism of the past year subsides, you'll notice they're agreeing with you more and not always saying no. Most of the time, they're pleasant and friendly, and living with them can be fun. 3-year-olds are very social. They like to be wherever you are. They also like to be together with children the same age. For the first time, they truly begin to play together, not merely alongside each other. They can share and no longer selfishly grab toys away from their playmates because they've begun to understand what it means to hurt someone's feelings. Language is extremely important at this age. By the 3rd birthday, they have the capacity to understand and express hundreds of words, and they begin to use language to get what they want. They start to respond much more to adults, and they talk more to other children, too. They pay a great deal of attention to language, whether it's from TV, radio, or hearing other people talk, and they start to incorporate some of the newer and bigger words into their conversations. Between the ages of 3 and 4, you'll find them following you around, asking questions constantly. What they're doing is trying out their newly acquired language skills. They're gathering more information about the world around them, and they're also using questions to get you to talk to them more. Try not to feel irritated and respond with as much patience as you can. You'll be helping your child learn. In the area of physical skills, 3s aren't as awkward anymore, and they're steadily learning to control the muscles that make finer movements. They're able to hold a pencil correctly and copy simple line drawings in imitation of your example. During this year, they should be able to learn to name 3 basic shapes, tell if things are the same or different, build a tower with as many as 9 blocks, and count 10 objects with some help. Don't forget that children vary in their accomplishments, and if your child matures at a slightly different rate, that's no cause for concern. In self-help skills, they should drink from a cup or glass without spilling, completely feed themselves, dress themselves, and climb in and out of the car without assistance. As their abilities increase, your work gets easier. You can devote increasing time and energy to sharing experiences and enjoying life with your little companion. Throughout childhood, there are periods of ups and downs, and the age of 3½ is, for most children, one of the unpleasant phases. The child that 6 months earlier was happy and comfortable in every way may now become fearful and anxious. It can be very difficult to live with them during this phase, but if you have some knowledge of the stages of development that children go through, you'll realize that those times when you'd prefer to avoid them are usually the times when they need you the most. So give them your individual attention for a small part of every day. Let them know that you care and appreciate them, and you'll find you have fewer problems to deal with. Typical 4-year-olds are exuberant and outgoing. 6 months ago, they may have been shy and insecure, but now they're content and very sure of themselves. They love new experiences and seem to have boundless energy. The best way to enjoy your enthusiastic and active child is to join right in. Do things together. Don't be surprised, though, if sudden mood swings occur. This girl dug a nice hole in her sandbox and then became sad because she couldn't take it in the house. They can go from happy to miserable in seconds, but whatever the reason, their feelings should always be respected. They have a passion for new adventures, and they'll frequently try to see how much they can get away with before adults step in to make them stop. Children this age need and like to be told things like, "You may not play on the roof." They feel safer and more comfortable when they know what their limits are. It seems to give them some security. The energy and drive they display in everything else can also be seen in their physical skills. They constantly run, somersault, gallop, and climb. Fours are very much in control of their bodies, and especially well-coordinated children can begin to learn how to ride two-wheelers. Their fine motor skills are also quite well developed now. They can draw a recognizable person and can also cut on a line with the scissors. Practicing these things helps their hands and fingers to manage finer and more delicate movements, an important prerequisite for learning how to print. Their imaginations are very rich, and they spend a good deal of time pretending to be somebody else. They have a good command of the language now. They understand almost everything you say to them, and they speak in sentences that sound almost grown up. As children near the end of their 4th year, their parents start thinking about what they need to learn in order to be ready for school. An interest in formal learning may or may not be present in children this age, but that's no cause for concern. You do not have to teach preschool-age children how to read and write. There is no need to force them to learn anything. All you need to do to help prepare children for school is to recognize what stage of development they're at, notice what they show a spontaneous interest in, and then provide them with experiences that are appropriate. Their own interests will tell you where they're at intellectually and what they're ready to learn. If you do try to teach specific concepts, you'll have better results if you try to connect learning with living. For instance, you can teach counting by letting your child hear you count the dishes as you set the table. After a while, the child will start to imitate you, because imitating adults is what children do naturally. Then, by the time they're school age, without ever pushing them, they'll very likely show an interest in many of the skills they need to know, like trying to print letters and numbers. Always remember that a child's birthday is no guarantee of readiness for school. It takes more than academic readiness. Success requires a certain maturity in all areas of growth and development. If children have difficulty relating to adults in authority, are unable to follow directions, concentrate, or sit still for a reasonable amount of time, it won't be enough that they can read and write. Their first experience in school will not be a successful one, and that could affect their future success as well. It will be hard to get them to feel good about themselves or about school if they fail in the beginning. So remember to look at all facets of your child's development when determining readiness for kindergarten. Don't worry about starting them a year later if they don't seem ready. By the time they're 21, how old they were when they entered kindergarten will seem very unimportant. Remember, the best way to prepare your children to succeed at school or at anything in life is to give them a great deal of love and attention in their first 5 years. Early life experiences are important in determining how well a person functions as an adult. If children receive the proper intellectual stimulation and feel emotionally secure and loved, there's no telling what they'll be able to accomplish in life.